Reggie, I believe you were the last one to come in. If you could check your audio, and guys, we are live streaming now.
Yes, I'm here.
I can hear you. Thank you.
I can hear you. Thank you.
Reggie.
Yes. Hello? Yeah.
Good evening, everybody. It's good to see all of you again. We've got another great and exciting meeting tonight, and I'm just delighted that you're here. We're going to try to be respectful of your time because we know this is a big evening for some of you, at least following this meeting. Geraldine Gardner from the Central Carolina Regional Council will be sharing their planning work called Connect Beyond. This is important because it provides a kind of regional perspective, something we have heard from many of you that you find to be critically important. And then we're going to get into the homework that all of you did over these past few weeks. And we're going to highlight and summarize what we heard and get a chance to hear from you and your reaction to the summary that Scott Curry is going to share with you later. And then it really gets exciting after that when we talk about the transformational mobility network and the opportunities surrounding that. And Ty and Stephen Stansberry will lead us in that discussion. And then finally, we will get to the public comment portion of our meeting, and then I'll move on to next steps and how we're going to deal with the upcoming months. Geraldine Gardner from Central Carolina Regional Council, you have stage center.
Thank you, Mayor Gann. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Okay, wonderful. Sarah, I'm just going to say next to advance the slide. So would you mind going to the next one?
Sounds good.
Thanks. So good evening, everyone. I appreciate the opportunity to share with you this exciting initiative that's been several years in the making, and I feel has a tremendous synergy with our work on the task force. I've got limited time, and we certainly have a large agenda ahead of us tonight, but my goal is to make sure you understand what Connect Beyond is and how it relates to the work that we're all doing together with Charlotte Moves. But before I dive in, I really want to emphasize that I'm just the spokesperson tonight for a wonderful team and a very dynamic partnership with the MTC, the City of Charlotte, and many other organizations that you'll hear me refer to throughout the presentation. You'll see this in the next couple of slides, but it's really important to note that from Central Carolina's perspective, we believe that partnership is a vital component, not just to the process, but to the ultimate success that we hope to have with this initiative. Next. So let's start off by orienting ourselves to the scope of what we're trying to do here. The purpose of Connect Beyond is to define a single coordinated transit vision for our region. And by region, we mean 2 states and 12 counties, which are home to over 2.5 million people. And embedded in our regional approach is the importance of collaboration across multiple planning organizations, regional planning organizations, councils of government, and transit and transportation providers. Next. So in addition to a bold and compelling vision for regional transit, it's important to note that we are absolutely building on the CAT's 2030 system plan and all the other regional and local transportation plans across the study area. But think of this initiative as extending them out, both in terms of time and geography, to create a more comprehensive regional vision. This initiative will yield specific recommendations and an implementation strategy, because I can say with confidence that no one on our team wants to do just a plan. We're hoping for both the big and bold long-term projects that might be a little expensive, as well as the short-term micro investments and enhancements to today's rider experience that will better connect them across the region. Next. But why does this all matter? We've got a great initiative happening in Charlotte and Mecklenburg. It's our most populous county. It's certainly the economic engine of our region. Why should we think regionally? We know, and certainly we heard this at our last meeting, that we need a reliable, connected, and multimodal system to keep us economically competitive. Our fellow task force member, Janet Labar, and her organization, the Charlotte Regional Business Alliance, knows that we compete for talent and investment, not just in North Carolina and not just in the southeastern part of the US, but across the nation and globally. But we can't just afford to think about the people who aren't here yet. we will put our current residents and businesses at the center of this process to work to improve transportation choices and connections for them. Think about the senior in high school in Gastonia who wants to live at home but attend a 4-year university that's local. How can we connect that learner to the UNCC campus by transit? Today, that trip takes 2 hours and 30 minutes and requires 3 transfers. I think we can do better, not just for that learner, but for residents and learners across the region. If we do this, then we can move the needle on some pretty big regional challenges that we know we face. Growing sustainably and aligned with our regional growth strategy, which I'll touch on in a moment, advancing our efforts to bridge social and economic equity gaps and injustices, and positively impacting our environment by moving people out of cars. Next. We can agree that this initiative is pretty ambitious, but it also has really deep roots that go back several years to the Connect Our Future project, which established a vision and a strategy for how our region can grow sustainably to 2050. Through Connect Our Future, we proved that we could all work together across the state and county lines to think big. We engaged over 8,000 people during that 3-year planning process. And what we heard from that engagement was the critical importance of enhancing mobility access and connections to achieving the type of growth that we need and deserve. The tie was so strong that we immediately pivoted to diving deeper into scoping out what a regional transit planning process would look like, which ultimately led us to where we are today with Connect Beyond. Next. For those of you who aren't maybe not familiar with Connect Our Future, one of the main deliverables was a preferred growth scenario. This is just a snapshot of what that regional map looked like. And what you can see is a nexus between transportation and land use. And also, we imagined a regional transit system in that process. So we're simply picking up the thread from that plan and making it actionable through Connect Beyond. Next. So I can't emphasize enough that this is a partnership between Central Ina and CATS, and you certainly heard from John and his team at one of our earlier meetings. We have wonderful experts on our teams that are really leading this process, and we're grateful to be able to work with them. Next. And of course, we have wonderful consultants and technical experts that are led by HDR. Next. These types of initiatives take a lot of resources, and so we're grateful to have all of these funding partners at the table, not just for their resources, but also for their technical expertise that are helping to make this work possible. Next. And this coalition and partnership was really on display at our February kickoff event, which was practically on the eve of our COVID-19 crisis. But we had a great day at that event and had strong participation from stakeholders across the region and representation from elected officials at all levels who really came together to launch our initiative. Next. So we would hope that this would be done much more quicker than 18 months, but we know it takes time to conduct the type of thoughtful analysis and engagement that we need to achieve our objectives for this process. But we hope by this time next year, we'll be moving into our final recommendations. Next. I'd like to quickly break down with my remaining couple of minutes some of the main components to give you a better sense of the steps that we're going to be taking to build a regional vision through this process. First, we're going to start with a baseline and really create a snapshot of where we are today across our 12 counties, understanding challenges, opportunities, and aspirations for the future. And hopefully we'll do this through robust stakeholder engagement despite our COVID-19 situation. Next. In step 2, we're going to turn to some big moves, looking at the set of high capacity transit corridors that will create the foundation for a regional system. These will link major destinations and we'll really be exploring different types of transit solutions, so not just light rail. These high-capacity corridors will align with current and future land use patterns and expand on existing plans like the 2030 plan. Next. In step 3, we're going to connect the dots, build out the network, and shift to designing an interconnected network that enhances transit access and connections while balancing out big moves with some of the smaller things like micro investments and tech solutions. This could mean a regional transportation demand management program. It could mean an integrated ticketing system across our different transit providers, or even a mobility as a service or MaaS solution, which connects public transit with app-based solutions like ride, bike, and scooter sharing platforms. Next. And then lastly, we conclude with the ever-important blueprint for implementation that will include both local actions and coordinated regional actions. And if we've done our job, we've built the public constituency and the public-private partnership and coalition that we need to advocate for the type of action that will move this plan off the page and into reality. Next. Our roadmap for building that coalition runs through these 3 committees in our Transit Academy. Our policy committee is made up of elected officials at all levels and policy experts, including some private sector representation through our partnership with the Alliance. Janet serves on the committee, as well as Reggie Henderson from Lowe's. Our technical committee is composed of our staff experts and funders, and we're hoping that Mayor Gant will appoint a representative from this task force to serve on our community advisory committee to add another layer of coordination and collaboration. Next. So I'd like to conclude with a few quick points about how there's synergy between what we're doing and Charlotte Moves. So hopefully some ideas have already percolated by the time you've come to this slide and this point of my presentation. Geography should be one of them. Also our focus areas. We're both talking about transit and how to integrate land use and transportation and design a system that's going to work for everyone. We're also building off CAT's efforts and other local transit authority plans. And partnerships is a major theme, both in terms of how we develop the plan and implement it, which finally leads to governance and funding. The resources that are going to be needed to implement both initiatives, both the quick wins and the bold moves, will actually require us to work together. And we're certainly stronger when we can advocate with one voice for what the region needs in Raleigh and in Washington. Next. I hope this gave you a brief introduction to our initiative and provoked some ideas about how we can connect the dots between what we're all doing, both here at the task force and the communities and organizations that you all represent. I've got a great team, and I'll do my best to answer any questions that you might have, but we might need to follow up on anything technical. Thank you very much, Mayor Gant. That concludes my presentation.
Thank you so much, Geraldine. Are there questions from the task force members? You said a lot in that 15 minutes, and one of the things that I found interesting was 18 months. That's not a long time. Where do you expect to be at the end of the 18 months? If you can go back to that slide.
Sure. So we hope to be done with the vision and the recommendations from the plan. So at this stage, this is a good one to stop at, Sarah. We started in February. COVID kind of threw us for a curveball like it did everybody. So we're adjusting our engagement plans accordingly. So there was a little bit of a delay, but by this time next year, we're hopefully cruising into this 4th step and really kind of making sure we've got the right vision and the right implementation strategy.
Okay. Are there questions from the task force members? Hear none? And then let's proceed to the next item on the agenda, which is the homework assignment. What we heard, and we heard a lot of things from, I think, 12 different groups on the task force. And I want to thank you again for your extra work. And this is going to be a little bit of a pattern as we proceed forward, that you will continue to do hopefully do some things in terms of a deeper dive, some of the things we were discussing this evening and in future task force meetings. Scott's going to give the summary of different positions that were taken and different issues that came up. Scott?
Thank you, Mayor Gant, and thank you, task force members. I'd like to start by saying that I think we were all impressed by the depth of thought that you all gave to this. We had responses from every group. You had some incredibly insightful responses to the prompts and some clear and honest questions for us to consider. And perhaps most importantly, I think there was a dedication to your communities that was clear in the aspirations that you all described. So thank you again for sharing that with us. Initially, we suggested that we might have each group report back on their own conversations. After digging through the results, we decided to take a little bit of a different approach to the recap. We felt that it would be maybe a more efficient use of our time for staff to prepare this summary that you're about to see, and then allow you all to react to that and to point out anything that we may have missed. Of course, we won't be able to fully capture the nuance of your conversations within a 10-minute overview, so we'll count on you to help fill in the gaps after I go through these slides. We also hope that later on in the presentation, you'll see that what you told us is reflected in the new material that Stephen's going to share with you later as we dig into a framework for the Transformational Mobility Network. Next. So the first prompt that you all discussed is what's been particularly insightful or useful to you during our time together. One of the things that we heard from several of you is that you were impressed with our existing plans and maybe weren't aware of the comprehensive nature, the comprehensive foundation of transportation and transit planning that had been completed. It was also clear from what we heard that you all really enjoyed the conversation with the peer cities and took away some key lessons from those folks. Among them, Broward County's success based on the inclusion of multiple transportation modes is something that several groups mentioned. Next. We also asked you about what has been missing from the conversation. And it was clear from the responses that a lot of you are mindful of the financial side of this. We had lots of questions about how much does this grand vision cost? What are the funding tools in our toolbox? What can we really afford? And so it's clear that in the coming months, that's going to be a topic that we really need to dive into, and we appreciate those honest questions. We also had some questions about what's the game plan after December. Once you all complete your mission and deliver this mobility network to the mayor, what happens next? And so it's on our radar to try to be clear about describing how that's going to look moving on into 2021. Next. So throughout this series of slides, you'll see some quotes that you all gave to us. Again, this doesn't cover the full depth of thought and nuance that we saw, but I think a lot of these quotes were emblematic of some of the things that we heard. So this is from Tammy and Ken, just getting back to that question of cost and scale, and what are the tools available to us to implement a transformational mobility network. Next. We also heard from some groups about how does this fit in with other regional plans, and I think Geraldine's presentation that you just heard helped us to start to answer that question and coordinate and align this effort with the efforts of other regional organizations. Next. We also heard from some of you who were thinking about the less flashy modes of transportation, bus service, sidewalks, pedestrian crossings. You wanted to make sure that we don't lose sight of the basics as we talk about our larger transformational network. And then some really thoughtful responses about what's happening to the mobility landscape underneath our feet. We're all living and moving around in a different pandemic world, and what does that look like when we get into a post-pandemic future? And then the role of tech, digital tech revolution in the transportation sector. Is that something that we can rely on to support better efficiency, and if so, how? Next. The second prompt asked you and your groups to identify the most important goals and priorities that you shared in common. And there were 4 very clear themes that emerged from this prompt: regional connectivity, equity, transportation choices, and growth management. And so we're going to jump into each of those in turn. Next. This is from Raquel and David. The 2 goals that they agreed upon most clearly were equity and regional connectivity. So again, just highlighting some of the things we just saw. Next. So different groups spoke about regional connectivity in different ways. For many groups, it was very transit focused, Silver and Gold Line. For others, it was focused on finishing the Greenway network. Some folks were mindful of regional bus service, and then others were mindful of regional coordination with neighboring towns and counties. Next. Similarly, different groups defined equity in, I think, really different and insightful ways. Some groups focused on access to opportunity as a primary goal. Others talked about access to essential services. Some groups focused on affordable transportation options like walking, biking, and transit. And others talked about where we need to invest first and how, by focusing on the most vulnerable and least connected areas. Next. This is from Danielle and David. Ensuring that everyone in Charlotte has access to basic needs is a paramount goal of this effort. And that was one of many similar comments across all the groups that underscored equity. Next. From Janet and Chris, we are aligned in wanting Charlotte to be a Tier 1 global market and achieve equitable access to strong, vibrant, healthy neighborhoods. Next. So transportation choices was the 3rd clear theme that we heard out of the homework assignment. Every group spoke about multimodal transportation options and underscored that all are important in achieving a true mobility network. Some keywords that kept appearing over and over: safe, reliable, affordable, connected. Next. This is from Eric and Pedro. Other transportation choices must be on par with the automobile experience or better, which I thought was an insightful comment. Next. And then growth management was the 4th theme that very clearly emerged out of this prompt. A lot of groups highlighted the need to manage growth along our corridors that are already congested. We understand that population and density are increasing, but in many cases, widening thoroughfares is not a good option, or not really an option at all. And so how do we grow into the future and move more people more efficiently? And how do we support multiple centers as destinations? Next. This from William and Carl. We need to address traffic congestion and the cumulative effect of growth on daily car trips. Next. And then the last prompt expanded on some of the things we talked about last month around this definition of greatest need. Some folks jumped straight into a definition of greatest need highlighted by the need to expand and enhance the transit network. Other groups focused on an idea of balanced investment, which we thought was something that was particularly insightful. And balance in terms of sort of bigger ticket investments versus lower hanging fruit, quick win type of investments. Also balance in terms of long key regional corridors that support connectivity across jurisdictions, balanced with first last mile connections into neighborhoods. Next. This from Sonia and Jim. The greatest need for long-term is rail. It should be the foundation of a multimodal network that connects people to businesses and homes. Next. And then from Geraldine and Nick, we need to balance big ticket items with low-hanging fruit that would improve the transit experience and increase ridership. From Reginald and Aaron, the greatest need is regional connectivity with walkability and pedestrian biking lanes in neighborhoods. Next. This question also led some groups to talk about equity and starting with the most vulnerable, least connected places. And a number of groups talked about using the existing data that we have at our fingertips with an equity lens to determine the places that have the greatest need. Again, ensuring critical access to services and making sure that residents aren't displaced by the affordable options that we are trying to build to serve them. All of those we thought were especially insightful comments around this prompt. And then some groups talked about safety and defined that in different ways. In the short term, to some groups that meant responding to COVID-19 and moving effectively and safely in a pandemic world. And then in the longer term, other groups spoke about the need to prioritize safety and vision zero and effective maintenance of our network. Next. This from Elias and Betty. We need more public transportation in underserved areas. Next. And from Kiba and Ernie, connectivity, reliability, and safety, probably the three most important words around mobility. So I hope you can see in all these responses that all the groups were incredibly insightful. We really appreciate the conversations that went into these. Next. These were some other key thoughts we took away that didn't fit neatly into the three prompts, but we felt like were worth highlighting to you all. You all really enjoyed the homework. We heard that loud and clear, and we intend to give you more opportunities to interact with each other outside of our monthly meetings. We're learning a lot on the fly. We know that we are giving you a lot of information to digest, and we appreciate you all sticking with us through that. Some folks underscored the need to think long-term and mentioned aspirations related to children and grandchildren and what types of transportation are relevant 20 to 30 years from now. And then a good reminder, I think, for us as support staff to you all is that we need to have a reminder at each meeting about your specific mission and scope so that you all can prioritize your feedback efficiently toward the ultimate goal or deliverable of this task force. And so we heard that, and that's something that we will do our best at in the coming months. So with that, I will hand it back over to Mayor Gant to invite any questions or conversation.
Thank you, Scott. Boy, it was like drinking from a fire hose. All the wonderful things that you've been talking about, and what you as the task force have been dealing with in your homework assignment. I want to now turn to the portion of this agenda that talks about getting your reaction to what we just heard you say, I guess, or as summarized by Scott. Does anybody have a definition of what transformational means and would share with us at this moment? Okay, nobody wants to speak up on that. Is there anything that you think we missed from this summary that you and your group talked about and we just sort of missed it? Or is there anything you want to underscore or underline? Feel free to speak up, folks.
Okay.
Okay, I'm at a disadvantage because I don't even see the,
I'll forget.
speak up, yes.
Yes.
Is this Eric? William.
Or William. I'm not sure if William wants to go.
Yes,
Go ahead.
I'll go ahead and go. Thank you. So it seems like, so I'm really impressed, and hats off to the TAWO and the leadership group in regards to the 2040 plan and the thought process to guide everything through an equity lens, because it seems to be bleeding through with most of the things that we're doing, and it seems to be a dominant assessment of every action that we're taking as a city. So I just really want to say thank you to those folks for leading in the way that hasn't been as present in the past. So hats off to you guys, and thank you for the presentation.
Thank you. Eric?
Yep. I was really inspiring to see everybody's comments put together like that, and really appreciate kind of streamlining it so we could all see it pretty quickly. I know it was a lot, but I do appreciate being able to see everybody's comments. Some of the things that I would just like to underscore and add, I think, hopefully when we're done with this task force, that we complete a way to show the vision of those goals and values that were just kind of shown by all of us, equity and affordability. And I would like to be able to see how we could wrap and tie and intertwine the funding into those core principles and goals. I would also like to be able to see, like, for everyone to be able to see a vision, this vision that we're putting forth, and that the plans that we already have, kind of translating that into something that voters can see. And the closer we can get to being able to show them what their lives will be when this investment is completed. I think, as close as we can get to show, okay, they could see on the map where they live, where they work, where they play, how all that is connected. Even if we can get the times, the costs of what a travel trip would be, the time they'd save, any way we can be able to visualize that so folks can see what this investment will, what it will be for them, what they get out of it. And I think the closer we get to that, the easier this will be for, getting it in front of the voters and for them to say yes on this investments.
Thanks, Eric. Bill?
So a couple of things. I absolutely agree, Eric. It's just astonishing what people are coming up with who really have not had a lot of experience in talking about these issues. A couple of things that really struck Stefania and me were that we need to be very clear about what we're trying to accomplish with the transportation investments that we propose to make. We bandy around words like transformational and equity and congestion relief. And so for 70 years or so, we've focused on relieving the congestion from the automobile. Our conversation has now vastly expanded, as it should have a long time ago, in terms of how we connect people with places that they need to get to, which ultimately leads, I think, Taiwo, to what you're trying to achieve, or what we're trying to achieve with the comp plan, which is having a much better conversation about how do we intermingle land uses so that as we talk about other types of transportation other than the automobile and other than transit, all the micro mobility options and the human powered options that we have, that there's somewhere people can get to in a reasonable and safe fashion. So that yields a land use element. Both Stefania and I talked extensively about gentrification and the impact that that has had in our observations on people being forced to move from areas that are very rich in transportation options to areas that we think are probably not, pushing them farther out, while those of us that live in the areas rich enjoy that. But how do we make sure that we don't price other folks out of it? Thanks.
Very insightful. Very insightful.
Your Honor.
Yes. Thank
And
you.
hi, this is Pedro Perez. I want to take a chance and risk trying to define transformational. And if we consider that poverty, homelessness, equity are intersectional, as we develop this transportation plan, I think we have to consider that if we do not include changing the potential outcomes of children, as you recall, there is a new app called the Opportunity Atlas. And that Opportunity Atlas identifies down to the granular level zip codes in which children live and describes whether or not they're going to have the opportunity to move socially upward and to have opportunities to gain long-term success and wealth. And if this transportation system does not connect, as everyone has been saying, to the issues of equity, opportunity, and ensuring that there is not displacement, then we're merely doing transactional work. And I'm hoping that the work we are embarked on, and I see it in much of what's being written and much of that has been said, to consider those issues. that ensuring that as we build this, we're building it so that folks that are under-resourced can gain the resources they need to heal themselves, heal their community, and create generational wealth through home ownership, because they can then move and work where they want to move and work. That's how I view transformational.
That's deep. Thank you. Thank you, Pedro.
Mr. Mayor, this is
Yes,
Tammy
Tammy.
Simmons. I would be remiss if I didn't mention the Johnson C. Smith University corridor and the Gold Line, how transformative that will be to the university when we think about students having access to a campus that they may not have prior to the Gold Line coming right in front of the university's doors. We absolutely have got to raise that as a wonderful example of how transportation could be transformative. We think about the university's viability because will be easier to get to, but the broader reach, definitely are those students who now have maybe the opportunity for a 4-year education. They can get there, and our university certainly supports Black and Brown students, and it's just going to be, I think, a wonderful thing for the entire corridor, obviously, but certainly and specifically for the university.
Okay, thank you so much, Tammy. I'm sure there are other folks out there itching to say something. Come forth.
Mr. Mayor, this is Ernie Regal.
Hello.
And one thing that strikes me as I look through the materials, and I thought we may be talking about this next, but the summary materials about what work has already been done. I keep getting this feeling of being overwhelmed in terms of what we really want to do or need to do to have a transformational plan, and how that matches up against the voices and the input and the experience of actually touching the people that are in the community. Because when you look at what's already been done and you count up, and it's great work, and all the different community opportunities and meetings and everything, whether it's with CATS or these other efforts, we're touching 1,000 people here and 400 here and a couple thousand here, but we've got a region of a couple million people, and we really need to. I think the only way we're going to get those people that are going to have to vote on or approve or support these things is to have our political leadership in line with each other across the board. I mean, obviously they won't agree on everything, but they've really got to get behind this, and they've got to be able to articulate and communicate to their constituents, no matter what part of town it is or what part of the county it is or what county it is, why this is so important and why everybody's got to work together. And I think we've had some great comments from other folks already about how we've got to make sure this covers the equity piece and all the other bits around making sure that opportunities are met for everyone. And so there's a way to weave this story into a very robust, positive vision that, frankly, if we had you as the mayor and along with Vi, our current mayor, I'm sure you two could put it together and get everybody to buy into it. But I'm rambling. I'm going to stop here and just say it needs to be an all-out effort that's communicated in a clear way so that everybody can really understand why we need to do this. Thank you.
Next.
There's another comment from Eric.
Eric. Eric?
I was basically just commenting back to what Pedro said and some of the other folks about improving opportunities for the folks who need it the most is critical. And on top of that, we need to make sure that we figure out how to prevent folks from getting pushed out further and further away from transportation choices. That is, that in itself is a tricky problem to solve, even if, not mentioning all the other aspects of what we're trying to take on in solving mobility here, but, keeping people where they want to be and not forcing them out has to be solved sooner rather than later before we get too far into this and folks get pushed out once again.
Thanks for that. And who am I talking to? Charles. Carl.
Yeah, I'm struggling a little bit with this. And I think of transformational. I like what Pedro said. When I travel around the world and go to different cities, there's a different vibe in each city. And now we're right in the middle of a social injustice, social equity revolution, so to speak. There are some cities when you land in them and you get around town by walking or biking or taking the bus, you feel like you're part of the community. And I think it has to do with transportation and how the transportation can bring people together. It's not just getting body A from point A to point B. And up in New Jersey, people are on the greenways and trails and they're interacting a lot. And these are not people that look like you or sound like you. And so I think when I hear transformational, Charlotte is so car centric that everybody gets in their car, zips to where they're going, gets in the parking deck, gets in their office. And it's not like that in Portland and Austin and Kansas City and Frankfurt, Germany. And I think we have an opportunity to make this city more friendly, more open, more willing to accept people of different statuses and everything else because of the transportation system brings them together on buses and on light rail, on walking, on biking, and all the restaurants and everything that happen along those kind of venues. People are kind of forced to just talk with each other, which is what I think we miss now, right, in Charlotte. We're a big cosmopolitan city, but we don't feel friendly like some of the other cities are. And I think transportation has the opportunity to transform Charlotte in the direction of that. Thank you.
Geraldine, thank you. Geraldine? Is Geraldine there?
Sorry, I was muted. Can you hear me?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. I just wanted to build on that great point from Carl. Nick and I had a wonderful conversation during our homework assignment. And, I'm definitely the new kid on the block when it comes to being in this area. And one of the things that Nick shared with me was this tension, the history of Charlotte and sort of going after big things. So transformational being big, bold visions, big projects. And it was a great sort of history lesson and orientation for me to understand sort of this context that I'm now working in. And so I would just propose back to the group, maybe transformational is not about the size and the scale or the dollar amount of the project, but it's the transformation that touching one person with improving transportation access for them, it transforms their experience. It transforms how they see the city, how they connect with people, kind of building on what Carl said. So maybe transformational isn't necessarily big ticket, high value investments. It's the little things that matter to people that will improve their day-to-day, improve their opportunities to connect with each other in the city.
Thanks for that, Geraldine. That's a definition on transformational. Others?
I just have a comment, Mayor Grant. This is Elias Mohammed. I guess we pretty much have discussed on every corner or aspect of the things what we are working towards. Is there something on how we are leveraging technology with our plans? Are there any ideas or any defined plan on leveraging technology at our new transformation things what we are planning for? And if we do, what are those? And having arts as a means of communication, this transformation, what we are talking about, are there any plans in our agenda to put any arts or culture to show what Charlotte City represents? I mean, having that aspect of representation would be, great. What Carl just mentioned, when we visit other cities, other places, uh, arts and the sculptures which define the city gives a different impression. It makes us mingle to the society. So are there any plans or anything on our agenda or something with the task force we can discuss or talk about?
That's a good question to raise. Leveraging technology, how we incorporate art into our city to make us have livable communities, places of high quality, places people want to go to.
Right.
And that, I suspect that those things happen and can happen with support. Right now, we have, as a part of every transportation program, I think public art is inclusive as a part of it. A portion of the budget goes for that. But I suspect I hear something deeper that you're saying. And that is why people want to move about this community. Why do they want to connect and what do they want to connect to? And it's more than just connecting to your workplace or where you worship or where you shop, that the city itself ought to have some additional meaning and some magnetic effect that causes people to want to move. And I'm not sure we can answer all of that on the issues of how we move people about the community. But what you're saying is people will move if there are things to move to. And if we leverage technology in a way that gives the experience of being a part of a city a great deal of meaning. That's very insightful in my opinion. And I want to throw out one thing, and I'm sure there's some other folks who want to. I have been wondering when we use the word transformational, does this task force want to come out of this with a network, a movement network that connects people from all sections of this community, from all stations in this community, from every zip code in this community, and ties it to the rest of the regions? And if we come up with a plan, is the plan a plan that we are going to put forth to the community that is not limited by the perceived amount of money we have available to us? If you think that we have $5 billion to spend, then can you come up with a transformational mobility network plan? If you think we got $30 billion to spend, is it going to be another plan? I think what I'm trying to say is I have heard nothing but good things from the homework that you've done. The hard work that we will have to do is deciding on transformational network and whether that's tied to what we think Charlotte can afford or the region can afford. That's what's been revolving through my mind, because I could see at the end of the day that someone's going to tell us down the road, you got $1 billion to spend. And then we got to fight to figure out, is that transformational? Or do we present to the community something that really connects something that really excites, something that pulls people together with all these nice sounding things you want: regional connectivity, equity, transportation choices, managing the growth of our city. If you come forward with that plan, are we going to be constrained by what it costs? Or are we going to get out in front and say, this is worth the expenditure? This is worth it to us to do this, because we will build a city. I saw someone talk about their grandchildren and great-grandchildren. We will build a city that will at least set in place the roots for moving on to a greater community. I'm wanting to hear some feedback on that. Do we design the transformational network to fit what we perceive to be what we can afford, or do we do something that really excites the imagination and deals with these themes of connectivity and equity and choices? Are we talking about a system that reduces the use of the automobile to 40% of the way people travel in our city 25 years from now? Or do we accept a plan that we think we can afford? I'm going to stop there. I didn't want to carry on. Let me go to William and we go to Chris. I didn't mean to get involved like that, but
Well, thank you. And you basically took, stole the thunder that that I was
I'm not
thinking.
stealing thunder, sir.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead, give me some
Yeah.
more thunder.
Well, yes. And so, I mean, when I think about transformational, I think about the way Charlotte's always done things, right? So the way we always do things is we put money where money already is. We don't put money where it really, really needs to go. That's why we're talking about equity right now. And I think that we have the ability to do something that is incredibly transformational here, whereby not necessarily we're singling out any particular area of our town, but where everyone can benefit and everyone can see the benefit, and we can clearly articulate the benefit. Because what I find is that people are willing to pay for something that they receive, and when they benefit from it, they'll pay for it. But if you can't clearly articulate to me how I'm going to benefit from it, then I'm not going to support it. No, I'm not going to want my taxes to go up to support something that I'm not going to benefit from. But I think in this conversation, and to your point, I think that would be truly transformational, where we can reach a wider group of our community, and we can articulate how it benefits everyone. I think people would vote for it on bonds, and I think it would pass. So I think that would be transformational in my mind, changing the way that Charlotte does economic development. Because at the end of the day, we're talking about money, we're talking about economic development, and we're talking about property values, we're talking about commercial property values, we're talking about further economic development, and we're talking about wealth and prosperity. And if we're talking, we don't want to see gentrification happen, then we need to put transportation in communities that are being gentrified. Why not? But to your point, I think that would be the goal. And I think I would choose option B, going, the unsafe route, the transformational route.
Chris?
Yeah, thank you so much. I don't think these are mutually exclusive. I think with $1 million, you can do something transformational. I think with $30 billion, you can do something transformational. It's about the scale at which that transformation is that determines the dollar figure. I would not be willing to vote or support any kind of project that bankrupts our city. I think that's a bad idea. I think you build a great transportation program, and yet no one can afford to live here, especially those in communities that need more opportunity. Making their property taxes and their sales tax and putting regressive taxes on them is a horrible idea. So no, I would, transformational to me doesn't mean you throw out of the window that every project you do, and as a leader of project management, you should try to exceed expectations, but you also do it on time and under budget. So I don't think that those are mutually exclusive, though. I think if you make the business case that if you take 40% of cars off of our roads, you can save X, Y, and Z, then let's make the business case. But I don't think we sit here and say, we'll figure out how to pay for it later. I don't think that's good for any citizen of Charlotte. We should come up with the plan, and we should say our plan should be those things that we can afford. And if we're creative in our business case and we understand the real opportunities that this transformational project can do, then we should be able to say that I'm taking money from here, but I'm putting it somewhere else. The investment 10 years down the road that we have to do for roads is no longer necessary. And so we can look at the time value of money and bring that forward and say 10% of that cost is a savings that we get today. And so I think we can do great transformational things that cost a little amount of money or a lot amount of money. If we're trying to decide how to do this project, I think it would be valuable for us to have a consultant tell us, what do we think citizens of Charlotte are willing to pay right now? And then we design around that and we be transformational within our budget and with our constraints, because I don't want to see our city be bankrupted like very many other cities that have made bad business decisions, hoping to fix something in the future that didn't take into consideration any of the long-term impacts. And that's especially true for those communities that need this transportation, but it does no good if they're getting a bus ride to nowhere because there are no businesses for them to go work for.
Thanks, Chris. Did I get another? Anybody else want to contribute to this conversation? That's a very good, interesting perspective. Jean?
Just real quick, your invitation to think more broadly, Mayor Gant, is compelling. And I think Carl's comments really landed on me just a moment ago with regard to the feel of our city and the friendliness and how transportation can impact that. But thinking more broadly, which again, I think you just gave us the invitation to do, I mean, to me now, that has everything to do with land use too, which I haven't been thinking about in the context of this committee. It's all right, we build, you know, this transit system to change, if you will, the feel and flow of our city. Well, where to? Now I care about land usage and where to, and the connectivity of those two things, which now tonight it's much broader than what I was feeling when I got on the phone or on the call.
Thank you, Tammy.
So I don't know if Jean was going to say something.
Is it Jean? I hate these virtual meetings. Jim? Speak up. Are there other comments? Well, this has been lively up to now, and I've got 24 task force members. I don't know how many are present tonight, but I'm very well aware that I haven't heard from about 2/3 of you. Okay, but
hello?
Yes.
Oh, okay. I'm not sure if I'm operating. This is Sonia Smith. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I wanted to just add to this conversation, kind of like, I'm thinking in terms of this transformational, that word kind of just resonates with me in my broader goal of, or my broader vision of what I see as far as transportation and what it does and how it affects our community. When I look at all of the things that people have said, all of that resonates with me. But what I was thinking was in terms of how to pay for this. And I'm thinking that when we're looking at these, like when we talked about, when we were listening to the plan that the young lady put, the regional plan that was put forth before us at the beginning of this meeting. When I think about those major arteries, those major corridors, I'm thinking in terms of companies that could be stationed along those corridors, that could have easy access as far as jobs are concerned, but companies that would build the kind of the new technology, those new jobs and in our schools like Johnson C. Smith and UNC Charlotte and other Queens University and in other schools around the region, that where students could be gaining those skills, the Central Piedmont of community colleges, where students could be gaining those skills to work in those particular companies and work at those particular companies that are bringing on this new technology, this new revolution, this new environment, as far as job opportunities, people getting those type skills. And then all of, and as a result of having transportation connect and then having those companies help pay for this, because they're going to be benefiting from having employees that have the skill sets that they need to function in this new economy, that they'll benefit as well. And then like Pedro talked earlier about the marginalized people coming out of the shadows and being able to operate and get the skill sets that they need to participate in the community as a whole and be able to enjoy all the fun things that we're talking about as far as connectivity and culture and all of that. And so I'm thinking of that phrase that all boats rise. And so in helping to help pay for this thing, getting back to the point that I really want to make, I'm thinking companies can help come in and help pay for this stuff. I know that's just one little thing, but companies that are going to benefit from the new workers that are going to come about as a result of us thoughtfully planning how this is gonna look in our future. That's about it.
Thank you, Sonia. Others, this is getting richer by the moment.
Mayor,
Yes.
it's Eric. I would like to add that I think the latter part of your question, going bolder, more transformational, making the vision, the plan, you know, in a way that folks can get excited about it, is needed. I mean, you can't drive people to vote a yes or to support something, you know, that people aren't very excited about. And I think, you know, you have to communicate that, like I mentioned earlier, in a vision and clearly show people what they're getting. But it, you know, paying the costs, as Chris, you know, was mentioning, I think if we lay out a thoughtful plan, you know, and do it in phases, you know, say a 3-year or and then 10-year and then a 20th, or you could spread those costs so you can have these bigger, more exciting plans, pulling all the vision into reality and kind of spread that over, you know, over time, like Broward County showed us how they successfully did that with, you know, just a 1 cent sales tax increase. I think, you know, that's not going to, you know, what people will get in return for that penny on every sale. You know, they may not have to have a car payment. You know, think of, you know, not owning a car, not having forced to drive everywhere you went. There's no car insurance, there's no car payments. You're spending more money. That money you're saving, you're spending locally. You're putting it back into the local economy. And I think all of those things can be done, you know, as long as it's thoughtful, it's planned out, it's complete. You know, I whenever I talk to folks about urban planning and kind of what was just mentioned, the land use piece of it, not thinking about that. Well, you know, I always explain it as baking. You know, I used to bake. I don't have any time to bake anymore, but baking, you know, you have all these ingredients. Now, if you leave one out, you know, the whole thing could turn out horrible. Or if you put too much flour in and not enough sugar, or, you know, whatever it is with the ingredients, you have to, first of all, make sure you have all of them, and you have to put them in proportionate for it all to come together, the chemistry. In transportation, land use, the design is all kind of chemical when it comes together. Going back to what Carl mentioned too, that bringing the ingredients, that's bringing the people, the design together to create this chemical reaction, which is the experience, which then relates to transformational quality of life for the residents. And I think that's what drives people to visit the cities that Carl is mentioning. You know, people want to be there, they want to live there. And, you know, brings the businesses and the economy. And I think all of that will grow if we get it right. If we miss this opportunity, we leave out an ingredient or two, you know, it's going to drive folks away from this, because if other cities get that recipe for what is working and they invest in it, all of the ingredients put together, that's where folks are going to end up wanting to live, because it brings a higher quality of life, more opportunity. And I think that's the plan we should be striving for.
Thank you, Eric. Any more comments from my task force members? There have been some good points made, and I sense there is an aching for us to figure out a number of things. Chris speaks to affordability, which is very important. He's absolutely right. We can't end up putting something out before the public that bankrupts the city. I think we all understand that. What we don't know right now is what the city could do, what our portion might be, what this transformational plan might cost. And those are items that we're going to be getting into in substantial detail in upcoming meetings. But I simply wanted to get a gauge from the task force members. I'm an architect by training, and there was a very famous landscape architect that said, make no little plans, because they don't have the ability to stir men. They don't have the energy to cause people to think creatively and to see the future. And I want to keep that before us. When we talk about transformational, are we talking about transformational from the standpoint of what we think we can afford? And I realize you don't have all the answers to the question of how much money is in the pocketbooks of citizens in this community, or businesses and citizens. If there are no other questions, then we might move on to a discussion now of the next item on the agenda. Just a minute, there was a question. I want to go back to, I think Ron Ross wanted to talk back about something Geraldine said earlier, talking about Connect Beyond. There is a huge lack of connectivity to and from Northwest Charlotte, Beatties Ford Road. Funding and completion of the Gold Line Phase 3 is needed without delay. This is a priority need, west and east. That's from Ron Ross. Do you remember the place?
No, is it from?
Well, that's a YouTube comment. Very good. Okay.
So we can get to it.
We can deal with that later. Right. Yeah. All right. Let's go to the next item on the agenda, which will be the mobility network itself, the transformational mobility network, and who's going to speak to that?
Yes, I will. I will start.
We'll hear from Tao.
Yes. Thank you very much, Mayor Gant. Really exciting conversations you all are having. I hear and I'm saying I'm loving it, hearing all of this, and really good segue to what we're about to share with you. Starting with the next slide, which is the next few slides are really more of reminders. As you requested, as part of the homework, you wanted us to remind you of the mission, of why you're here, what you're here to accomplish. We started this whole conversation back in May with this 5-point approach of this is the charge of the Charlotte Moves Task Force, but also that at the end of the day, when you deliver something to Mayor Lyles and council and the community, it will be recommending a mobility network to them that the community can support, that the council can really have an opportunity to dialogue around it and present to the community for a future discussion. And so reminding you of that today again, that this is a platform for civic engagement. We've reviewed existing plans with you and we'll continue to go back to that. One of the things that I shared with you by email yesterday was a summary of the engagement activities that we've had with each one of those plans. And so we're hearing you, we're hearing the community, and we'll continue to do that as we go forward. But today, the next slide, we want to kind of just take you back to when Mayor Lyles joined us at the June meeting, when she referred to the Charlotte Future 2040 Comprehensive Plan as our North Star, that's what's going to guide us as to where we're going, what our vision is, and what we are really to be developing. And this goes back again to some of the things that you said as part of the homework, talking about providing a safe and equitable mobility integrated network for travelers, regardless of age, regardless of income, ability, race, wherever they live or how they choose to travel. We've had a lot of this from your conversations tonight, and we've had this reflected also in the homework. But remember those 5 guiding principles there that Charlotte, or whatever that transformation and mobility network is, at the end of the day, is going to accomplish this. Whatever the scale may be, is going to accomplish this of creating a livable and connected city, a healthy and sustainable community, a prosperous and innovative environment. I think Elias talked about technology, leveraging technological ideas, but inclusive and very diverse community, as well as understanding the role that Charlotte plays in this region. So it's not just about us as a city, but as a region. But also at the end of the day, that transformation and mobility network must be one that's integrated and not just catering to transit or even roadways, but also talking about bikeways, sidewalks, trails, and things that really make sure that every Charlottean can really be proud of our city. Next slide. And again, we talked about this being a coordinated effort. And so we started with a strategic mobility plan, which really goes back again to what Mayor Gant just referred to a few minutes ago. So maybe in 20 years' time, we're talking about mode shift between single occupant vehicles, people who take transit, or people who carpool, or folks who even bike to work. What does that look like? The strategic mobility plan will be talking to us about that. But then part of that really, though, is the work of this Charlotte Moves Task Force. The strategic mobility plan started at the same time as the task force started meeting, and it will continue definitely through the early summer of 2021. But we know that the work of this task force effectively results in a deliverable to the community and to council in December, but we don't want that to be the end. We want you to still be able to see what the outcome of your work is and how that's reflected in that strategic mobility plan that eventually will be adopted by council. But while all of that is going on, we know, we're hearing you clearly, what's the funding strategy? From tonight, you're gonna begin to see what the network of opportunities will look like, but also when we come back in September, we're going to start talking about financial funding tools. What are those things that we're able to do today? What's on the table for us? What are those things that we could be asking? If we're going to go big, we're going to have to go big within reason, right? And we're going to have to make sure that we develop a funding strategy that not only looks at one funding mechanism, but looks at multiple. And so we don't want your work to end with the discussions that we're having around this today, but that it continues, that eventually will result in either putting something out to the public in November of 2021, but making sure that whatever goes in front of the public, you already are at the table discussing that, having that conversation among yourselves, but also with the community, and then with our council. Next slide. Someone talked about making sure that it's not just a list of projects, but something that's visual. When you think about Denver, when you think about Seattle, these are examples of what they've done, where it's not just a list of projects or what they look like, but really, what would they really, when someone who lives in East Charlotte looks at this map, they can answer the question, can I really get to the west side of the city in a seamless fashion? If someone lives on the south side and they actually have to come uptown, they talk about, can I really get uptown without having to drive and be stuck in traffic? And so they should be able to see a map and not just a list and be able to say, yeah, I really can do that. So at the end of the day, what we're going to be sharing with you tonight, before I hand off to Stephen, is going to be eventually displayed in a graphic fashion, where you're able to see transit corridors, you're able to see biking trails and pedestrian trails and how all of these connect, with each other. But tonight begins that conversation. Stephen is going to walk us through some buckets that we've kind of put together of what's possible. I call it blue sky, and probably will form the basis of your next homework, but I hope that it will also result in a very vigorous conversation after he's done presenting it to you, just like we've had a few minutes ago. And so before turning it over to Stephen, I want to say that in some way, what we're going to be sharing with you really reflects the results of your homework and the results of what we've heard from the plans and policies that we've developed before, but it's also going to be something that you can really help us to think through, and not just about roadways, but also about transit, about pedestrian connection, about trails, and all of those things that make a city that people really truly want to be proud that they belong to. So I will turn this over to Mayor Gant, and then if he has anything to say before Stephen takes you to the next few slides. Next slide.
No, I think I said enough. I really want to get to Stephen.
All right.
So that we can hear more.
So Stephen, over to you. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Ty. This has been a great meeting. I got to tell you, I think we're probably trending right now. Just incredible discussion this evening. And yet, as I take copious notes, I'm sure that there's still some of us wondering here again, what does this network look like that we're going to be creating together? And in essence, I think there's a few things that we need to remember. If we package this up, we're going to need a framework for how to organize our recommendations. And it needs to be able to be supported with a series of maps. I think that's pretty clear. But I also know that based on tonight's conversation, we should be able to communicate the influence that we expect this transformational mobility network will have on our community. That seems to become a recurring theme as I listen very closely tonight. So in preparation for the creation of this transformational mobility network, we've been thinking a lot about the logical framework that we might use to assemble these opportunities. And I want you to think of these as funding categories right now. We're by no means, to borrow Eric's metaphor, that we're not baked this cake just yet. So we're assembling our ingredients and we're building the airplane a little bit as we go. And I appreciate the liberty with which you're giving us to do so. But we need to allow ourselves to be influenced by what we're learning through the process. And I know that you've been inundated with a lot of information about existing plans. And so we've been studying them as well and trying to better understand how they're organized. We've been listening to peer communities, thinking about lessons learned from that. And I think we learned a lot from tonight's homework. I can't tell you how much I think it's brought some clarity to the conversation just to hear from you about your specific thoughts. So, I mean, in short, we've come up with essentially 6 categories. I think we could have had as many as 20. We could have done as few as 3, but we landed on 6 for right now. And I just want to reiterate, this is draft for the moment. So let's go on to the next slide. And essentially, these 6 categories, and I hope that you can read them, include things that should be familiar. We've been talking about them since May, but rapid transit, something that we're going to refer to as bus priority for now, greenways, pedestrians, bicycle, and roadway. And I think that if we reflect on some of our past meetings, you'll note that we've broadened out already. We learned a lot by listening to the peer communities. And in fact, I think one of the big takeaways we all had was we need to ensure that there's something in this for everyone, and that we're not exclusively focusing on big infrastructure, for example, because while we might be able to advance a particular aspect of our system through some big investments, if we can't get people to those networks, we really may not be making as big an impact as we might hope. And the good news here again is that we're not starting from scratch. Just to reference once again, there's so many great plans. You heard about another one tonight from Geraldine. We've got a lot of things that we can and should be populating these categories with. I want to caution us, I don't believe that it's just an assemblage of all the plans together. That probably just dilutes our efforts, but it does suggest that there's a central repository from which we could be inspired to select things from. So let's take a closer look at each of these categories. Let's go to the next slide. And I've got a few examples for each of them, but let's go ahead and take a look at the next slide as well and jump right into rapid transit. So I think this is probably the easiest category for all of us to comprehend. Essentially, these are facilities and services such as our light rail system, but it also would include some additions like things you've heard about in past meetings, bus rapid transit and otherwise. And there's some specific examples listed here, some of which that we're in the midst of planning for. Some are those that are things that are yet to come. And so I don't want to spend too much time on a concept that I know you already get, but suffice it to say that that category is fairly clearly pronounced at this point in time. Let's look at the next one. So bus priority, I introduced earlier as kind of a title we've given to an investment in an enhanced bus network, something that's more than what we have today, that focuses on frequency, that gives a greater advantage to our buses when thinking about the competition for space and time and traffic, and also contemplates how we better connect people to that system. The flexibility of a bus system obviously has the ability to connect with more areas of our community when compared to maybe the larger scale rapid transit that has to operate on a fixed route system. So those are some interesting opportunities for us. The next one. Greenways have become so popular in our community and elsewhere around the US. We need to only look in our own backyards for inspiration about what more we could be doing with this type of investment. Little Sugar Creek is just one example of many, but there's great plans right now to better connect our region through similar facilities. And we've listed a few of these. We don't need you to become an expert necessarily in the network, but we know that this can serve a new role in providing opportunities for travel. This is not just recreation anymore. When we start contemplating our ability to connect employment centers, for example, or neighborhoods that otherwise don't have access to other modes of transportation, greenways not only become a place of recreation and exercise, but a conduit for people with purposeful trips. And so it becomes another ingredient for us to consider. The next one. So we've entitled this pedestrian, but I really want to clarify that what we're really talking about is this notion of the first and last part of every trip. Planners and engineers often talk about the first and last mile. And it's the most critical step because here again, if we can't get you to those mobility opportunities, then maybe the investment doesn't go as far as what it could. And for that reason, we know that things like enhanced pedestrian accommodation, little things even as much as eliminating barriers to crossing streets, or creating the opportunity to go from a station to the front door of a destination through something like a scooter or walking or biking can be incredibly important. Let's take a look at the next one. So the bike network, generically speaking, should be more inclusive than just our greenways, for example. And we know that we're going to need a more pronounced network over time. But we also need to be sure that that network is more inclusive. If our network right now only supports the fearless bike riders, then we're missing the opportunity to better leverage that as a mode of travel that's incredibly affordable, that is accessible to almost all. And so we believe that maybe a category in and of itself to represent a network that better connects our streets, our neighborhoods, our employment centers could serve us well. Next category. So I think we were reminded that it's not just about walk, bike, and transit, but that we all need to be able to travel better. And some of that has to do with enhancing the efficiency of our existing streets, maybe through improved technology applications. Some of it is ensuring that we're advancing safety as a paramount in all that we do, our Vision Zero effort, for example. And other aspects of it are really about ensuring that we're marrying the two concepts of land use with the street design so that we're better understanding contextually what we're offering our community as they travel to and from and within discrete places of our community. And so that's a very quick overview of the categories that we're working with right now. And we may ask you to embrace a little imperfection because I doubt that we've got it 100% right. But if we go to the next slide, I'd really like to focus on what your homework will be for September. And obviously all of you know that because you did such a great job with your homework this past month, that you were likely to receive another one. Fortunate for us, your surveys and your results indicated that you were willing to provide us that level of information. So I want to thank you in advance for making this effort. But we had good dialogue tonight. I mean, I think we've been throwing around the word transformational fairly loosely. And it was really interesting to listen to a few of you make an attempt to define it in an ad hoc moment. But I also know that all of you would probably appreciate the opportunity to ruminate on that a bit more and to contemplate what it might mean to this process and what it might mean to ensure that we're providing an investment strategy, a transformational mobility network that actually does the verb in there, which is transform. And so we'd love to ask you in your small groups again to contemplate what it means to be transformational in this process. I think the next thing that really began to resonate, and I think we got lucky with this because we authored these questions before tonight, but your dialogue focused so much about some of the cautionary tales. Carl, you said, be careful that this doesn't become transactional. And Bill, you did a great job suggesting that we not lose sight of what we're really trying to achieve. And I think in essence, what I'm hearing is we want to build around a plan around what we want to achieve, not exclusively around a set of projects. I'm going to say that one more time, just be sure it sits in, that we may want to build a plan around what we want to achieve rather than exclusively around a set of projects. And if that's the case, we need to ask you questions, not just about what projects are of interest to you, but really what are the outcomes and community benefits that you would expect to see 20 years from now if we were to make a large ask of our community and make an investment in building this transformational mobility network. And so we'd like for you to really contemplate, what does that mean? And I'm going to throw some examples out just so you understand that it's not just about the movement of people and goods, the transportation indicators, but a lot of the things that you've been talking about, whether that's access to opportunity or maybe environmental benchmarks, affordability, equity, and economic benefits. We want to open that door because when you can help us define what we're trying to achieve, we can help assemble the right combination of projects that best serve those interests. And then the last item is, as you can imagine, to reflect on those buckets that I put forward just a moment ago. the transformational mobility opportunity buckets. Could it be any longer? And really help us fill them up. I know that we as a technical team could go through and mine the existing plans and seek to find those things that we believe are most transformational at this moment in time. But I also know that Mayor Lyles asked you all to participate for good reasons. You represent different geographies throughout the community, different perspectives, different experiences, different demographic and different cohorts. And with that in mind, we'd really like to just get your reaction about the things that may work well or are important needs, either geographically to you in your personal life or the community, the portion of the community that you live, or for a group of constituents that you believe needs to be showcased within this effort. And I want to give you flexibility. I don't want you to feel as if this requires you to do what we should do on your behalf, which is to mine through all those plans. But if you'd like to do that, that's great. And if you'd like to share with us a specific project and indicate where you think it best resides, that would be fantastic as well. But I also want to give you the flexibility to simply say something as simple as make the traffic signals work better, or ensure that we have access to opportunity. There may be a need for you to have some fairly broad set of items that fit within those buckets that link back to your expectations. So I don't want to put boundaries on what you populate in those buckets. Now, I don't need you to write these things down. As with our last month's homework assignment, what we'll do is we'll send a packet out so that you can work in small groups towards populating each of these questions with answers that you feel are important for us to hear as we continue down the path of our technical work. And with that, Mayor, I kind of like to see if there's any gut reaction to these three questions, if there's time. Thank you all.
Stephen, you've said a lot, and I'm sure there must be some questions that members of the task force might have. This is a good time to bring them up. I'll tell you what, I'm getting very excited about what's going to happen in the next month, the homework and the September meeting, which I think is going to be very, very good. Are there questions for Stephen on this transformational mobility network structure? All right. Bill Cox?
Thanks. I continue to wrestle with the geography that we are trying to cover with this. Geraldine took us through a bi-state geography, but the bike and ped plans that we talk about are Charlotte-centric. So as we think about what the transportation needs might be within our region or our city, those might vary the amounts that we would want to put in the buckets, in the different buckets. Just think about that.
Thank you for those comments. Anyone else? Eric, you had a comment you wanted to make on the tree canopy.
You caught that, Mayor. Yes, you know, and I could put that into the homework and you know, expand upon it a little bit more. But I'm been involved in that task force as well, and I think there's a great opportunity to include you know, funding resources to be able to, you know, treat the tree canopy, especially in the right of way that's connected to the pedestrian and the sidewalks, as not a separate thing, but as a vital piece of that infrastructure that is needed, especially, you know, we live in North Carolina, it's the South, you know, seems like it's getting hotter every summer and longer summers. So I think, you know, including that as a piece of it should really be, you know, thought through. Thank you.
Thank you. Ilyas, on carbon reduction?
Yes, Mayor Gant, thank you so much for the opportunity. So I saw this in our material strategic energy action plan. That's really awesome. I mean, if we can really put something more in our conversations and discussions, that would be great. And in the presentation, Steve just provided to us, the technology use part, I liked it most, and that's what I was trying to mention earlier in my comments. So thank you. That was all.
All right, thank you. Let me turn to the public comments because I think these are very important, and I'm very impressed with the number of people who have tuned into our meeting tonight and had a number of important things to say. I was trying to see if I could summarize them inside of about a few minutes. Let me just take a shot at it. Someone wrote in or called in to say that as a Charlotte resident, I want to offer my support in urging that you advise for major investments in public transportation. For environmental and equity reasons, we need major investments as soon as possible to help drive such investments in behavior change. They would support at least a 50-50 mode shift goal on transportation. And I think they're saying between the car and what other modes we might use. And they thank you all for your participation and hope you will support bold investment in public transportation to improve our city. This came from Dave Walsh. Nancy Carter said, I hope we will get the light rail from east to west, especially close to small businesses, to serve communities that will enrich our community. And Maureen Giluski, I hope I pronounced your name correctly, the city and the county need to work together to collaborate on a master plan to create value and livability in all the communities. And Christina Dana says, in the spirit of equity, it is necessary to provide allocation of resources to the west and east communities. Also, how will transportation equity criteria be defined in terms of degree of involvement of diverse public stakeholders? I suspect there's a hidden question there about how much influence does the public have, how much influence does the business community have, and so forth and so on. She points out that geographic equity focused on distribution of impacts across geography and space, and social equity focused on distribution across income, social class, and mobility are questions to be raised. Maddie Marshall says 20 or 30 years from now, transformational means a drone mobile car. Not sure what that is, but a skyway, and it also means connectivity in a smart way. And then she says, she gets back down to basics, complete the goal line in phase 3. And she points out that in the 1900s, there were streetcars, and this was a very smart approach, which was abandoned, of course, for cars. Let's see, I've got a few more here. Maureen Galuski of Charlotte East, and I think I started reading this one earlier. How are mobility gaps being prioritized and funded for the transportation corridors? East and West Charlotte are in gap areas, yet a good portion of those who live in those areas do not have cars. They have long bus commutes, which are unsafe and limited amount of walking, and a limited amount of biking connectivity. There was significant feedback, she points out, and a strong recommendation from guest representatives from Austin, Broward County, and Nashville to actively seek community input. And she says, so far, we have heard from the Charlotte Moves Task Force leaders, and what we've heard is not very robust. I don't know, I guess that's a criticism of us. The plan for a survey in August seems to be incomplete and rushed. Have you considered any virtual town halls? I guess not at the moment, but perhaps as we get further into this, we might want to do that. From YouTube, Nicole Bonaparte says moving phase 3 of the goal line would very easily reduce the automobile traffic in the center city. And I can't pronounce this name, but she said it's not bankrupting the city, but taking small pieces of money and addressing an issue partially is why we are where we are today. I guess she's saying halfway doing something is not good either. And then Ron Ross says, an assessment of what projects are needed or desired will result in determining the cost. And I'm down to the last one. Does the Connect Beyond process look at specific needs or an overall assessment of all that is needed? This person highly recommends an evaluation process that considers all needs without a budget in mind. There is a lack of connectivity to and from Northwest Charlotte. This is the third time we've heard this tonight. Northwest Charlotte, Beatty'sford Road. Funding and completion of the goal line, phase 3 is needed without delays. This is a priority. We need to connect the East and the West. And that's from Ron Ross again. And phase 3 of the goal line is a priority for those throughout the Northwest corridor of Charlotte. And that's from Nicole Bonaparte. So people have been watching and they have been ready to comment. I'm delighted to hear those comments. We record those and take those into account as we further deliberate down the road. Now, I'm going to turn it over to Ed McKinney, who's going to tell you about this survey slide that's going to come. Ed?
Actually, Mayor, I'll take that. So the public survey is live now. We previewed this last month and let you know that this was in development and would be coming. We have a specific ask of the task force members this evening. We will be sharing the survey link with you. We would love it if you would, first of all, take the survey. Obviously, we value your input and we want to know what you have to say. But just as importantly, please distribute it to your professional and personal networks. We want to make sure that we are distributing this widely. If any of you represent neighborhood organizations that maybe have newsletters or email blasts or social media feeds, please consider sending the survey out on those channels as well. And we will plan to share some of the initial results with you in the coming months as we work together. Thank you.
Ty, will you tell the task force how we're going to handle these public comments that are going to be coming in? And I suspect they're going to be more and more as we proceed into
Yes.
the meat of this.
Thank you, Mayor Gant. So we collating all the public comments and we make sure that we reflect those in a number of ways. One, the homework assignment that we give to the task force, we try and incorporate some of the thoughts and the comments. And then in the presentations that we ultimately bring to this group, we make sure that we reflect those as well. There are certain areas also where some of those comments are addressed that are not necessarily limited to the task force. For example, next week, I will be presenting this to the Intergovernmental Relations Committee, which is made up of representatives from City Council as well as county commissioners. And so the question with regards to coordination between city and council, I will be bringing that up there as well. That's the purpose for that intergovernmental relations. And then on September 1st, hopefully, I'll be presenting an update to the Board of Commissioners, County Commissioners, on the work that the task force has been doing up until this present time. So that's kind of how we've been responding to this. And in some other ways, the Transportation and Planning and Environmental Committee of the City Council, usually we present Silver Line, light rail project update to them, and we talk about connection between East and West where it comes to the light rail. We know there will be a community engagement on that in September. So some of those comments that you may not find here in this task force, we do address them in some other ways. So please keep them coming. With regards to paratransit, I think there was a question that just came in now about paratransit, and make sure that we consider our community with disabilities. Yes, these buckets of projects that we share with you as we present the homework assignment to the task force, we'll make sure that that's also covered in there as well. Again, please continue to reach out to your network with the survey, and we want to get as much information as possible so that when we come in September, not only do we want to talk about what we've shared with you tonight, but we also begin to dig into some funding tools. You're likely going to be hearing from our Chief Financial Officer at that point as well. So just wanted to leave that with you, and then I'll turn it over to Mayor Gant. Thank you.
Thank you, Ty. Let me thank all of you again for your wonderful attendance tonight and the vigorous discussion, the robust discussion we've had. I still want to get a little bit more participation from more of you on the task force. It's the problem with virtual meetings. I can't sort of see who you are and what you're doing, but I really appreciate the participation we've had this evening. I want to remind you that the next meeting is in September 17th, same time. And here's what I've been thinking. You're not going to like me very much for this. So we get down into the home stretch of this thing. I think we may have to add 1 or 2 more meetings before December. I think the conversation this evening, the dialogue suggests that there are some issues of complexity here that might require just a little bit more attention from you. I already appreciate the fact that you've agreed to do these homework assignments, but we may need to consider adding 1 or 2 more meetings. The staff will get back to all of you to give you some suggested date, and hopefully we can come up with the time to do that. Again, thank you for your hard work, and enjoy the rest of the evening and the weekend. Thank you. Good night.
Thank you.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good night.
Thank you, everybody. Have a good night.
Thank you all. Good night.
Good night,
Stay
everyone.
safe.
Good night.
Night.
Great meeting. Thank you.